everybody doing? Are we ready for the book club? We are Negroes who read, and that's how we find information. Not all the way, but largely. Why does it look so dark? It looks darker than normal here, but I think the lights are going. Might have to get them gone. Get them back together. Ooh, looks dark and dank and damp. Anyway, fam, let's get into it if we can. Let's try to get into it if we can. Please, though, before we get started, please hit that like button. Please share the video. Please hit that notifications. That's going to be very important, especially depending on what YouTube is deciding or has already decided to do with the browse feature, right? So you're going to have to, it's not going to be no more necessarily browse and find through the search and all that kind of stuff. So let's take ownership. Hit the subscribe button. If you have not hit, if you want to donate, you can always go to donatebrown.com, patreon.com/ycarnell, adosmerch.com. The shirts are going out Friday, which is tomorrow, a big batch, not all, but it'll get kind of caught up. So anyway, fam, we're going to get right into the book. Now, I don't have as many screenshots of the charts as I would like to have, because I didn't think to try to get them some other way, and I tried to get them and put them up here, and they didn't come out right. Like, a lot of stuff didn't come out right. Those of you who had a book, you got the book, and it just is what it is. It's gonna be whatever it's gonna be. So, fam, listen, we got to get into it. And I want to say something that I normally say. I normally reach kind of a conclusion at the end, but I think I kind of want to say this first before I even get to there. I'm bothered by this. Let me hold on one second, fam. I am bothered. Anyway, fam, what we have to do is well, there's nothing that we got to do, but what I need you to do is understand what I understood. And I think the book makes a case for this. But I think one of the first things that I just got to say, if I don't forget, if I said this is my main conclusion, I'm going to start with the conclusion. We have seen throughout this whole conversation about immigration and black immigrants and all this stuff, we have always said, or we have always heard from every black immigrant who has come to this country, we have always heard black immigrants have made a contribution. Black immigrants have done X, Y, and Z. And what you kind of find out as you go throughout and you read this and you listen, what you kind of figure out is that we got to the same way we carved out a space for ADOS and how we talk about people and how we discuss people. We got to carve out a space for a variety of black immigrants. You can't just say you black immigrant. No, we got to know where you come from, because this book will show you why the main people post civil rights and around that time and even before that who were fighting were mostly Caribbean. There's a reason for that, and the laws are for that, and we're going to have a conversation about what that means for everybody. Everybody can't shoehorn their way into the Caribbean legacy in this country either, because when we look at it, it's just them. All these people say, well, I'm a black immigrant and we contributed. You can't trace your lineage to the people who did contribute. So we're going to have a conversation about it. So get your books open, ladies and gentlemen. Get your books open, and I'm going to tell you some of the highs and lows, roundabouts and things like that I found, and I think we have to have a discussion about. We have to. One thing I didn't like about the book, and if he want to call, or if anybody want to call and talk to me about it, that's fine. But I didn't like this whole movers versus non-movers thing. I did not care for it at all. Y'all can tell me what y'all think when y'all call in. I did not care for the mover versus non-mover, and I did not like the explanation. Now, y'all can tell me about it. But first thing we going to do, let's go to the first page. We're going to talk about why this is such a big deal. Go to page 6. Go to page 6 for me, fam. We're going to talk about why this whole conversation is such a big deal, and how white supremacists have kind of used black immigrants and have made them a tool, and some are willful tools, and some were just trying to get away because their country was bad. It's a lot going on here. It's a lot of different stories here, right? So go to page 6, and I want you to go. You see this paragraph, the determinants of racial disparities in life outcomes. No, is that page 6? Yeah. It says, because black immigrants and black Americans are phenotypically similar, some scholars have argued that they are subject to similar degrees of racial discrimination. Consequently, if Black immigrants outperform Black Americans in the labor market, for example, factors other than racism must explain the disparities between Black and white Americans. Indeed, every U.S. census conducted since 1970 shows that before adjusting for social and demographic characteristics, Black immigrants from the English-speaking Caribbean earned more, were more likely to be employed, and had greater labor market participation rates than Black Americans. Now, the reason this is important is because white supremacists tried to use this to say there must be something wrong with you. If this group has come here and done better, you must be the problem. You must be the weakest link. It has been, and some people will deny, and you will have even my problem when I talk about Black immigrant allies versus Black immigrant enemies is that it's a problem when people agree with that narrative. And what he's going to say is that there's a lot more to this narrative when we look into it than what we have traditionally discussed. So let's get into it, shall we? There's something called cultural superiority, that they have a better culture. That's what they're getting into, white supremacy. Let's go to page 10 really quickly. Oh, I really want to get to that. Well, before we go there, let's go to page 8. I saw something I like to see. That's why I don't ever get through but about half the book, because I see something else I like and I skip over what I said I was going to talk about. Don't judge me. Anyway, page 8, the last paragraph, towards the middle way. There are 3 primary reasons why the myth of Black American cultural inferiority have persisted. The enduring influence of inaccurate anecdotal evidence, insufficient attention to how both selective migration and disparate pre- and post-1965 racial context shape the social and economic trajectories of Black immigrants and Black Americans, and the failure to fully account for differences in the relative benefits of employment in the United States. So what he's pointing to right there is a pre- and post-1965 context. So what we have is, in the pre-1965 context, what was available in terms of opportunities, what you were able to do, and who you were forced to be around, and the post-complex, which was something different, right? Post-1965, where you had access to opportunities didn't exist before. So let's keep going. As he says on page 9, I document several underappreciated disparities between Black Americans and Black immigrants, particularly in the domains of home ownership, marriage, and reveal that many of the immigrant advantages described in prior studies, particularly labor market advantages, were overstated. He says overstated. Now, see, here is the issue with that. That's true, because what he did, he broke down the Sudan and other people, like they didn't have necessarily the benefit. And it's about timing. So in the 1960s and pre that, the people and post that until around 1990 wasn't nothing but Caribbeans. So that's who we're talking about. We don't even start talking about Africans until we get to like 1990. That's like yesterday. So it's interesting what happens in terms of the pre area and the post. Like pre-1965 and post is everything. And who was forced to live with us during that time? There was a forced kind of solidarity during that time, right? And you wonder how much of that was passed down and how much of that had to do with Caribbean slaves versus people who might have sold slaves coming over here, and even other people who might not have sold slaves, who might be poor Africans coming over here, but thinking that, well, I'm just here to make money, because he talks about the importance of homeland. So let's go on to well, let's stay on page. Let's look at page 10, because I don't think I read this. I don't think I read this on page 10. Indeed, this is the first paragraph. During the 20th century, the sheer magnitude of discrimination against all Blacks allowed for very little variation to develop within the Black population by either social class or nativity. The analysis, he's going to get into it, but yeah, what he's saying is, listen, if everybody treated you like an N-word, then ain't nothing else you can do but just what you gonna have? Ain't no choice to do nothing but solidarity. That's it. That's solidarity. You just gonna do solidarity because it's all you can do, because white supremacy is behaving in a certain way. What you find though, when white supremacy begins to behave differently, everything becomes different. Let's see. Now let's jump to page 21. If you shall. Let me see. One of the things you find and this is true for everything. That's why I say policy, American policy creates winners and losers. What you see with everything is that nothing just happened in a vacuum or anything like that. This happened for a very specific reason. There were laws put in place that created an influx of immigration from a lot of places, right? We're talking about one place right here, but nothing. Well, it just happens. And no, you have policies that determine outcomes. Never forget that policies determine outcomes. So look at the mechanism driving immigration that's on page, like I said, 21. That's that second paragraph. And it says the overwhelming, wait a minute, let me go to 22. I think 22 is 22. I think 22 is a better quote. Let me see. 22, the last paragraph. Black immigration to the United States slowed dramatically after 1924, the year the Johnson-Reed Act was implemented, right? This Immigration Act contained provisions designed to curtail the flow of immigrants from both Southern and Eastern Europe and severely restricted immigration from Northern Africa, Arab states, and Asia. Because Black immigrants from the English-speaking Caribbean, the primary source of Black immigrants to the United States during this period, came under the Quota program, the Quota for Great Britain, the Johnson-Reed Act had no direct impact on immigration from this region. Indeed, most of the quota for Great Britain between 1924 and 1929, which was approximately 34,007 individuals, went unfilled. Despite this fact, the flow of Black immigrants declined to 1900 levels and remained low throughout the 1930s and 40s. In 1924, 10,000 Black immigrants from the Caribbean arrived in the United States. This number fell to 305 in 1925 and 617 a year from 1924. 617 persons a year from 1924 to 1932. That's nearly nothing. And it's all being shaped. This is being shaped by legislation in terms of how people are coming and the flows. Policy is absolutely everything. Let's go to page 24. Now I might have this chart. Let me check and see. Okay, yeah. It's kind of sketchy. But growth of Black immigrant population by region and birth. Now I want you to look at that little checkered line or whatever, that little broken line. That's the Caribbean. All immigrants is Black, and African is down. Is that little bottom line. Now notice that line don't really start to move really. Like it stays stagnant until like 1980, and then starts to creep up in 1990 and take off. That African line, right? So you see like who you get a sense of, okay, there's more solidarity with this group because they've been here longer, right? And they and those who have a history here were treated a certain way up until there was opportunity to move away. So you see something. It's very interesting. It's a very interesting book. Let me see. Let me push on. What was that? Page 24. Now, so what happened with them? Okay, let me put this off the screen. Let's go to page 24, the middle paragraph. Britain's immigration policies changed, however, in 1962. Motivated in part by nativist tensions over jobs and housing and the view by many in Britain that Black migrants could not assimilate into Britain. Oh, no. Let me go up. I made a mistake. This doesn't make sense without the first paragraph. It just don't make sense. The Nationality Act. Wait. Let's go all the way back to page 23, that last paragraph. Because many countries in the English-speaking Caribbean are former British colonies, even after they gained independence, they remained members of the British Commonwealth. All Commonwealth citizens were recognized as British subjects. The Nationality Act, passed by Great Britain in 1948, essentially created an open-door immigration policy between Great Britain and member states of the British Commonwealth, including residents of the island nations in the English-speaking Caribbean. So that's that. Now, what you have, you go down to the middle paragraph. Because Britain's immigration policies changed. However, in 1962, another policy change, like we just said, motivated in part by nativist tensions over jobs and housing, and the view that many in Britain that black migrants could not assimilate into British society. In 1962, Great Britain passed the Commonwealth Immigrants Act. The new policy instituted admissions restrictions that significantly reduced the flow of new migrant workers to Great Britain, particularly the flow of blacks from English-speaking Caribbean. Just as migration to Great Britain was becoming more difficult for these immigrants, the United States began to relax its immigration policies. In 1965, we talked about this, the Immigration and Nationality Act, also known as the Hart-Celler Act, and then London John signed the Immigration Act. Perhaps the act's most significant change to U.S. immigration policy was the removal of quota provisions, a hallmark of previous policies that disproportionately benefited immigrants from Northern Europe. Under the previous system, the annual number of immigrants allowed from a specific country was based on the percentage of foreign-born persons from that country living in the United States at the time of the 1890 census. Because few black immigrants from either the Caribbean or Africa resided in the United States in 1890, the quota system allowed very few people from these regions to migrate to the United States each year. Right? So what you have is another policy change, like we've talked about. Now you go down a little bit further and you realize it wasn't supposed to lead to this. You go down a little bit further to this little quote right here, and it says, on the eve of the bill's passage, Attorney General Robert Kennedy testified that the number of new immigrants was not expected to increase greatly, and other experts, while acknowledging the immigration from Jamaica and Trinidad would exceed the limit of 100, predicted that it would stabilize at approximately 5,000 to 7,000 per year for the Caribbean as a whole. Not one witness or legislator disagreed. But understand something, this happens all the time. This kind of thing happens all the time. So when you're deciding on immigration levels or whatever, it's kind of like it happens all the time where one thing is predicted by the CBO or whoever, and it's not what they say it is, right? So let's try to get through some things. Should I go through this? So you also see, if you look at page 26, go to page 26 really quick. I'm staying here for a little bit longer because you have to talk about policy. Policy matters. The Refugee Act of 1980, that's midway through the page on page 26. The Refugee Act of 1980 changed the U.S. refugee policy to conform with United Nations protocols by providing 500,000 visas per year to individuals applying to move to the United States as refugees. The Refugee Act started streams of migration from Somalia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea, and increased the flow of refugees from Haiti. Additional changes came a few years later when the 1986 Immigration Reform and Control Act provided a path to legal resident status for roughly 35,000 sub-Saharan Africans and 100,000 migrants from the English-speaking Caribbean who were living as undocumented immigrants in the United States. During the 1980s, the number of black immigrants residing in the United States increased from 653,460 to 1,308,678, partly because of the policy changes. Policy matters. I just think this whole book just tells you, forget about just what we're talking about. The impact of policy. The impact of policy. That's what it is. That's all it is. And I don't understand. I just don't understand if you're not here till 1990 or 1980, like what you even talking about. Because I think I have that chart here too. Hold on a second. Top 10 countries of origins for all immigrants in 2014. And you see Jamaica, Haiti, Nigeria, Trinidad, Ethiopia, Guyana, British Guyana, Ghana, Dominican Republic, Kenya, Liberia. So that's very interesting in the sense of like when we talk about contribution. When we talk about contribution and the contributions, now that doesn't mean you don't have allies. We're not talking about that. But we're talking about how everybody hinges on, well, what your contribution was to the country. Well, we had a contribution to it. Like what you get is, no, there were very specific laws in place. That caused Caribbeans to make contributions because they were here. And they were here for very specific reasons in terms of what we just read about the British or whatever. Like everybody, it's almost as if we've been shoehorning. Now this chart, where is this chart at? This chart is on what page? I don't know. Oh, that's up there. Well, it's almost like we talk about people shoehorning into ADOS. Well, I think there's another whole shoehorning that's happening in terms of how African immigrants are shoehorning into a Caribbean legacy and lineage. That doesn't really make a lot of sense. Now you can talk about who you are and see the only out for you now, honestly, is to just say I'm an ally to ADOS, because you have no other movement that you were a part of, right? You have no other contribution that you made. So it's almost like you have to be an ally to ADOS to be a part of something at some point, to tell your kids later, I was a part of America because I was a part of this movement. Everybody's like somebody just said in the chat, D thought all contributions aren't equal. No. And all contributions weren't made. There was no movement in 1990 for you to be a part of. This ADOS is the first movement in the civil rights movement. So you haven't had anything to be a part of. So if you're not one of the Caribbean people that we, and there are a lot of them, I just kind of pick some out. But if you're not a part of this group, I don't understand how you are shoehorning yourself into this legacy. When you break most of these people down, like when you talk about Black immigrant allies, civil rights, they all Caribbean. And that's why when you read this book, you understand why they were here. And then because they were here during a particular moment, like I'm summarizing some other stuff that's going to come up soon, but they were here during a moment where we were all treated, even though we're not flat black, they were here during a moment where we were all treated flat black, right? And so that creates a solidarity because of how white supremacy operated. Then white supremacy started to operate a different way, right? In such a way that they said, well, you're better and you get it and they won't. We're going to keep ADOS a bottom caste and not you. And what has to happen at that point is you have to turn against white supremacy. You can't turn against ADOS, right? So let's just keep going. Let's see if we can hop a little bit further. Let's go to page 36 really quick. Go to page 36, that middle paragraph. For example, Minnesota, Virginia, and Ohio are common destinations for immigrants from Africa, while Florida and Pennsylvania are popular only among immigrants from the Caribbean. Some of this variation is driven by visa type, owing in part to refugee resettlement assistance from the U.S. government. Many Black African immigrants reside in states that are not typical destinations for contemporary immigrants, regardless of race. Table 2.3 shows the top 10 states of residence for all native-born Blacks in 2014, as well as the top states for subgroups based on domestic migration status. Those who have moved across state lines and those who have not. Although the order differs to some degree, seven states, New York, Florida, Maryland, Texas, Georgia, California, and Virginia appear on both the list for Black immigrants and the list for Black Americans. Right? So in some places, they don't live around us. So I don't know how, and we're going to get to this, but part of the blessing and the gift that ADOS gives to Black immigrants is that you don't look different. So when people say, I do it, how can't you, or whatever, it's not just that we paved the way because of laws and the things that we did. It's because you look like us. So people don't make the assumption off top, right? Unless they hear an accent or something like that, and you can fix that. You can fix that over time. They don't look at you and think, "Oh, you're a foreigner." They look at you and think, "Oh, you're black." Now, pre-65 and even after 65, they say, "Oh, you're an N-word." That flatness that was created by white supremacy created something very unique. Now, let's go to page 41. I think I was just at 41. Is it 41? Let me see. We go to selection. Black immigrants, many of whom were positively selected on good education and work experience, were able to translate the skills acquired in their home country into employment in the United States. That's page 41. And he says, go above that. And he says, as I show in chapter 4, despite popular myths regarding economic success of Black Caribbean immigrants in New York during the 1920s and 30s, regardless of social class or skills, Black Americans and Black Caribbean immigrants were mostly confined to jobs in the lower rungs of the occupational distribution. When you are confined together, that creates solidarity. That creates what you see on the screen. If you are not and you come after that, it creates a whole different story. It creates a whole different story. Now let's go to page 53. Well, no. But, let's go to page 52 really quickly. Just to see what he's talking about. Researchers have examined 3 main factors, just so we know what the factors are. Possible reasons for these disparities, right? In terms of white and black and everything like that. We talk about foreign born, native born. Is 1, cultural differences, experience of discrimination, and selective migration. Selective migration is a really big deal. Now let's go to page 54. Let's see what time. Let's go to page 54 really quick. And this page is just interesting because what we talk about in terms of stereotypes. There's a lot of stereotypes. I think we can skip past it. Let's go to 56 really quick. Let me see. Oh no, 54. Let's go to the second paragraph, the second full paragraph. Similarly, I'm not pronouncing anything. Imoagene finds that Black immigrants from Nigeria, also a former colony of Great Britain, fare better in the United States than their counterparts do in Great Britain. In contrast, Black Americans, because of their connection to racialized history of slavery in the United States, occupy the least favorable position in America's discrimination hierarchy. So what they're saying is that you have a discrimination hierarchy, and the people who do the worst in the discrimination hierarchy are the ones who were discriminated against by the white people. So you don't want to make the white people feel guilty. And the white people know that they did what they did to us. And so they feel less guilty when they have to deal, that's what I took from it, with someone from somewhere else, because it doesn't have the same psychological effect. Because they didn't do nothing to you, according to them, but we know they probably did something to you, right? And imperialism and all that, but we're not going to talk about that, but that's how they feel. That's how they compartmentalize stuff to make themselves okay. Right? That's interesting. That's some interesting stuff. Now, let's keep it moving. Let's go to page 64. Let's go to page 64. Let's go to that first full paragraph on page 64. Every year, Black immigrants remit millions of dollars back to their origin countries, partly to support family, but also to invest in homes and businesses. Indeed, in 2015, nearly 17% of Jamaica's and 9% of Guyana's gross domestic product came from remittances. Similarly, nearly 25% of Haiti's GDP, 13% of Ghana's GDP came from remittances. Now let's go to the next paragraph in the middle. In the absence of credit and lending markets or government-sponsored safety net programs, such as unemployment insurance and government-organized retirement programs, often the only resource that households have at their disposal is the labor of family members. Now, let me just say something. Let me just say something really quickly, and I don't mean no disrespect. I don't ever mean no disrespect. Sometimes I might sound disrespectful, but I don't ever mean. What I'm saying is, what we have to understand. There has been a whole kind of, what do you call it? There has been a whole kind of boondoggle, is the word for it, boondoggle, where economies are kind of set up in underdeveloped countries, whereby people come here and they're not really anchored here, and that's kind of why you don't see them fighting for here. They decide that at some point they might go back home, and they send remittances back home. And he even goes into the book about how they see their class status as not here. That's why they don't care about being poor here. By being an earner who sends money back home, they have a high class status back home. They don't care about here. So they're not going to do solidarity here. That's a problem in terms of any kind of labor movement you want to have. Any kind of race movement you want to have. If somebody ain't invested here, why they going to try to fight for a transformative, some type of transformative black agenda? They don't intend on necessarily being here. And because of what he goes into here in terms of their wages versus our wage, when he talks about selective immigration, he talks about too, like those who come here and don't have money versus those who come here and have wealth because they're selected that way because they have to go through 12 years of school. That's a lot for a lot of countries. We don't think about it, but it is. What I'm saying to you in terms of that is that there's not enough resources for all of that. Now, what has to happen though, and we're not going to get into this on this show, there has to be some kind of move whereby America is not destabilizing other countries and causing them to be, because it's a brain drain on them countries too. It's not just coming here or necessarily competing with us. There's a brain drain. People other than elite immigrants, and there we have a lot of those too with the Indian Americans and Nigerian Americans, but other than the elite immigrants, right? Like people are coming because they're hungry or whatever. And a lot of that is caused by bad international policy. Now, we can get into that at another time. But I think people who are concerned and sincerely concerned about immigrants and coming here have to understand that the answer cannot be, America cannot absorb everybody. It doesn't have the resources for that. And you have to find a way through foreign policy so that people can stay home. I'm not saying that you don't ever have immigrants, but I'm just saying, I think if a lot of these people could make a wage and live a life at home without companies necessarily coming in and they don't have rights and rules and doing whatever, I think they would. They don't want to necessarily leave their whole families and try to do this whole thing and try to get reconnected here. But like that's the way the system is set up. And the system has to change. Because the system is good for them sometimes, right? Because they get more money here and get to send it home. But then you got to be here. And then like you have to compete against us. Listen, this whole thing is concocted in a very white supremacist way. So anyway, let's go through what we can get through, fam. Let's go through what we can get through. Let's go to on page 69. Let me see if I got any more charts or anything I wanted to see. What is this chart? Black immigration as a proportion of blacks living in the United States. Look how it took off though. Nothing takes off like that without the blessing of white people. And you have to ask what they were up to. They always up to something. Now look at this one. This is the what? Growth of Mexican origin and black immigrant populations. That's the Mexican. That's that solid line. The black immigrant population is the bottom line, which makes total sense though, since Mexicans are the country to our south, to the south of us. However you want to say it, it is fine with me. It is all right with my spirit. Anyway, let me go on to page 69 because I ain't halfway through the book and we're 40 minutes in. Good gosh almighty. Now, if you go to page 69, go to the last paragraph. I argue that focusing exclusively on how earlier waves of Black immigrants aided the economic adaptation of more recent immigrants severely underestimates the strength of Black immigrants' co-ethnic communities. In fact, the presence of large native-born Black community has helped the economic adaptation of every wave of Black immigrants to the United States. I said that. Like I said, when I tried to summarize it, just our presence. You didn't have to be an other necessarily because we were already here. We absorbed that for you, darling. Page 70. Oh, no, let me see. Let's go to education on page 77. Let's try to hop and skip. There's a great little chart on there. Go to that only paragraph on page 77. African immigrants have more than twice the amount of schooling as their counterparts in their origin country. Now, what does that tell you? If you have twice the amount of schooling, you are of the elite now. If you have twice the amount of schooling as the people in your country, you are an elite group. That's what it tells you. And that's different than other groups. Trying to tell you. Let's talk a little bit about social class, if we can. 78. Thus, prior to migration, these are, well, I think occupied. Yes. Thus, prior to migration, these individuals probably occupied the highest rungs of Ethiopian society. This degree of education selection implies that prior to migration to the United States, Ethiopian immigrants had access to jobs that allowed them to develop skills reserved for the most educated members of their home country's population. This is what I always say though. Like, there are a bunch of different immigrants, poor immigrants, rich immigrants, but we should not have to compete. And you don't get access to affirmative action as an elite immigrant, right? Or as any immigrant at all because it wasn't built for you. But I think it's doubly bad because affirmative action and all that stuff was built as redress for us. So it's only for ADOS. But I think it's terribly wrong for somebody who we're going to get to a point where we start talking about in this book how a lot of immigrants do better than white people. So if you do better than white people, if you outpace white people in earnings and education and stuff, how in the world do you have access to my redress? This is backward and all kinds of lopsided. If you are outpacing white people in terms of your earnings and education, how in the world do you get to go and apply for affirmative action because you black? That don't mean nothing. You're still elite. So let's just continue. Let's try to keep it pimping. That's all we can do in this world. Let's go to 81. Not all black immigrants share the same historical, contemporary reception, context, and differences in these contexts can produce disparate outcomes within the black immigrant population. For example, while black immigrants from Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Nigeria, Ghana, Cameroon, oh, that's how I said Liberia, I thought. Oh, Liberia and Ethiopia have received a neutral or favorable context of reception, which improves their likelihood of economic success. Immigrants from Somalia, Sierra Leone, and Sudan, because they are more likely to be Muslim and to reside outside traditional black immigrant destinations, are likely to face negative context reception. So, because you know why they receive that? Because it really kind of goes to how well you fit in with ADOS. And ADOS either are Christian or like have decided they don't go to church no more. And I don't even call y'all atheists. Y'all ain't atheists. Y'all decide y'all don't want to go to church no more because the pastor a thief. And so you decide you wasn't going no more. But that don't make you not what you is. But either way. And I love my Muslim brothers and sisters. Don't think I don't. I'm just talking about how hard it is sometimes to fit into the group. So what happens with these other groups, they don't necessarily fit in because of the context of who ADOS is. It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's fault. It's a boondoggle. You just don't kind of fit in. And what comes with that is sometimes traditional dress. You know, you all see Ilhan Omar. It's nothing disrespectful about it. I respect Islam. I respect everything that goes with it. But I'm saying culturally, it's a different kind of cultural use. It's harder for you to fit in culturally, right? And the people who fit in best culturally with us tend to do better. There's That's just what it is. And so it shows you the benefit of being able to fit in, to fit in with ADOS in that way. That's why Kamala went to Howard University, right? Kamala Harris. That's why she did all of that. It makes it easy for you to fit in with us and look like us, and then you reap all the benefits of being ADOS, even if you're not ADOS. But even if you're not Kamala, you're able to do that. And it was easier for like the Caribbeans and other people to do that because they were the same as us, and also had a very similar, almost like phenotype, like even more than Africans and other places, like sameness, right? I mean, sameness. Once you lose that, Stella got a groove back accent. But I love all accents though. But I just can't pronounce stuff, and it's no disrespect to nobody. I just can't pronounce things. I just can't. So anyway, let me get to the next thing. We got, it's so many boondoggles in this book. Boondoggles. Let me get to the next thing. What was it? No, I don't do that. Page 87. Let's go to page 87 real quick, fam. Somebody said to Stella get her groove back. Well, she did, and then she kind of lost it. But, you know, it is what it is. Things happen. But I don't know. I don't even know if black people consider Jamaica another country. That's like vacations. I don't even know. Like, there's so much eye-opening stuff. Like, think about every, like, but the West Indies is a different place though, right? Because we talk about the Caribbean, but ain't the West Indies the one who be thinking they white? Ain't they the ones? Ain't that the West Indies? I'm just asking. Answer my question, fam. Are they the ones who think they white? What happened to them? They be like, no, I'm not. No. What happened to them? What did they get lost along the way? Ooh, it's some things in there. Well, what is the right term? Somebody said West Indies is out there term. What is the term? Give me the right term and I'll use it. Give me the ring and I'll wear it. Give me the right term and I'll use it. I don't know what it is. Anyway, let me go to page 87. Somebody said it is, but no, there's this. No, it's not all of them. No, it's somebody from some country. Dominican Republic. Gosh, that's what it is. Dominican Republic. Is it the people in Dominican Republic who always talking about they white? Yes, me no black poppy. That's what I'm trying to say. I got my things mixed up. What happened with them? Because it seems to me like they're a departure from the conversation that we're having about people in the Caribbean. It seems to me like they are like different, and I don't know what happened. And aren't they the ones who kicked the Haitians out and stuff? Like, they seem different, and nobody's ever explained to me why they're different or why they think that they not what they is. Somebody help me figure that out, fam. You can call in. I don't know what it is, but they seem different from other people. So page 87, and this is the key to everything that we were talking about in terms of Caribbeans. I argue that the harshness, first paragraph, page 87, I argue that the harshness of discrimination and racism experienced by all blacks in the early 1900s left little room for significant within-group disparities amongst blacks by nativity. White supremacy determined that. They decide, white supremacy determined, listen, we're going to treat all y'all alike during that period. And so, it is what it is. And everybody's going to have to just deal. It's 101. Let me see. Page 101, the next to last paragraph at the bottom. Indeed, among African immigrants, the mean level of education was 13.24 years, and 36% had a college degree or more education. By contrast, among Caribbean immigrants, the mean level of education was 12.47, and only 20% had a college education. And what you find, and then he says, go to the next paragraph, several factors likely to explain the educational disparities between black immigrants from the Caribbean and those from Africa. First, the high cost of both physical and economic moving from Africa serves as a significant barrier to migration for Africans of modest means, and thus restricts immigration. So what he's saying is that you're going to get more Caribbean immigrants who are impoverished or whatever, or who are not wealthy. because it costs less to come here from the Caribbean than it does to come here from Africa. That's what he's saying. That's just is what it is. Page 103. You talk about, sometimes when we look at the 12 years of schooling, we say, oh, that's 12 years of schooling. That's what we do. That's K through 12, right? That ain't no big deal. Well, hold on. Hold your mule, because he makes a different point. To qualify for a diversity lottery, an individual must have completed at least a high school education, or that's page 103, last paragraph if I didn't say it, I'm sorry. To qualify for the diversity visa lottery, an individual must have completed at least a high school education or its equivalent, defined as successful completion of a 12-year course of formal elementary and secondary education, or have 2 years of work experience within the past 5 years in an occupation that requires at least 2 years training or experience to perform. Obtaining a 12-year course of formal schooling is no trivial accomplishment in many sub-Saharan countries. The mean years of schooling in most countries in sub-Saharan Africa is less than 7. Highlighting that across countries in Africa eligible for the diversity visa lottery, such as Ghana, individuals with 12 years of schooling are a highly selected population. Moreover, diversity visa winners typically need to move within a year of being notified. Given the cost of moving from Africa, it is not surprising that the diversity winners who actually migrate to the United States typically have more than 12 years of schooling, with immigrant flows more often representing the most skilled members of the origin countries. These people are skilled, and so people say, no, I'm just like you. I only had 12 or 13. No, you are the most skilled within your group. That is a really big deal. That is a really high bar. It just is what it is. And then there's no place to put them in the country that they're in. So you're basically training people for export. If these people have been in school or whatever, and they're going to do whatever, you're basically training them to be and go elsewhere. That's a problem too. Then go to 104. Third, relative to Caribbean migration, African migration is more recent. Because the Caribbean has experienced a more sustained period of migration than Africa, a greater proportion of Caribbean migrants have moved using visas intended for individuals seeking to reunite with family. So they have more family visas. This group tends to be less educated than immigrants moving for economic reasons. In 2014, compared to immigrants from the Caribbean, a greater proportion of immigrants from Africa came to the United States using visas reserved for individuals with occupational skills in the country, or using the diversity visa lottery. That's, what was that, 104? Well, you know what we might have to do? I don't never get through the whole thing. What we might have to do, this is the first half of the book. Let me see, 105. I don't think I'm going to get finished with an hour, and I want to hear what y'all have said. We might have to, I'll see what I might put up a poll tomorrow and see if we can maybe cover the second half tomorrow night if y'all want to. But because I've only gotten to page 105, and there's a lot more I want to get through. So we might have to, because this is kind of, this show is a lot, and we need, I remember I said I might do this. We might have to do that because I'm only at page 105, and I'm at an hour, and we are, the book is like 240 pages or 230 pages, something like that. And I got a lot of other highlights that I like to get through. So yeah, we might have to do that. Y'all silly. Somebody said nice shape up. I cut it myself. Anyway, fam, I think we might do that tomorrow. So we stopped off at page 105. Please do not let me forget. Please do not. I don't want to rush through this. Like somebody said, don't rush. So I don't want to rush through this because it's a lot here, and I only got through half. So let's let this be the part one, let's let this be part one, the first half of the book that took us through page 105. And if you call in, let's try to keep our stuff to the first half of the book. And tomorrow, we will do the second half of the book and have the second half of the conversation, because I felt like I was rushing a little bit anyway, and it was just a lot to kind of rush through it. But I don't want to rush through any more of the book, and I want everybody to have their say. So I am going to go to the calls. We'll do a part 2 tomorrow for the second half of the book. I'm going to go to the calls. Give me 1 second to set up the phones as usual, and we will come back and we will have the conversation. family, we are back, and I am going to the phones. What y'all sniggling and giggling about in the chat? Anyway, I'm going to the phones. I am going first to 757. 757. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hi, Yvette. This is Sloan speaking. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you? Ooh, you got a good one.
I'm good. Excellent. I wanted to bring up something on page 145. It actually doesn't matter because, let me just put it this way. One of the things you brought up, or you're talking about when they talk about the immigrants from Haiti, Dominican Republic, Somalia, Sudan, and stuff like that. I think what we're missing here is that Dominican Republic is a special case because I don't think they bring this up in the book. I haven't read it, but remember, the Dominican Republic got invaded by the United States in 1965. So before then, we had people coming in. Basically they were Spanish. Now, Dominican Republic made it different, and the people that came in, they basically took advantage of that. They got over it. Let's put it that way. And we didn't have that after 1965. You had people coming in after 65. It's sort of different. They took advantage of some things that we couldn't take advantage of. You have a class, something like, say, for instance, you have somebody like, say, Lobby Brass is in the same class as Colin Powell. But they're both immigrants, but they have two different mindsets. And so I think that's part of it. Part of it is not just the mindset, because some people, they get different things differently, and I think that's part of the problem. When you came through, right now I know that in South Africa, the guy that's in charge of immigration in South Africa, he's just African American, yes, but he's Nigerian. And it's making a difference. But the problem is that he was anchored, even though he was in the United States, he was anchored in Nigeria, and so his point of view is going to be different than our point of view. And I think that's part of the problem. Is that people are not, you're right, they're not anchored in the Black experience. So the Nigerian guy, basically his family is still in Nigeria, but he was born in the United States. Therefore, he's an African American.
All right.
And,
no, I appreciate it, and I think.
Sorry for rambling.
No problem. I got no problem. We got to keep it moving, though. Thank you. I appreciate it. Y'all got to read these books. I appreciate calling in this, but y'all got to read the book. I'm tired of this. All right, we got to get through it. 310, what's going on?
Well, yeah, this book is probably, we've had a lot of powerful ones, but this is for what Adolph is talking about. From a data perspective up there, I just felt like at certain points he wasn't connecting it and being honest about what certain things meant. We had a great, well, let me not say great, we had an interesting dialogue with this Karen Atia girl yet again with the Washington Post.
Woman, she's not a girl, she's a grown woman. I say woman.
Yeah, and so it frames kind of this discussion because the one thing I think this book does is something that Adolph has been doing for a couple of years, so it's not like surprising to us. It just shows, if you have the tweet, you can pull it up. She's like basically lost. She's either lost her line, one or the other. The reason why we say that is she doesn't understand your family just came here. Our family's built here. We would understand that if we went to her home country, I believe Ghana and Nigeria. And you read this, it's kind of weird to be born here, raised here, catch racist hell all the time. First of all, I would like to see you catching racist hell all the time as an educated woman working for the Post. And be forced to play slaves in school. Being forced to play a slave in school doesn't make you an Adolph person. You still have those professional parents. You still don't come from no slavery. You still weren't sold to America. You still, it's so crazy. But this book, I think, really frames how ignorant this tweet is in a very unique way. But I think where he fails to connect the lines, and I'm not saying he didn't have this tweet, of course, when the book was written, but to explain how this line of thinking doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think one of the points that I see is when you go back to what you said about skilled, like the selectivity of choosing certain kinds of immigrants that are highly educated. The interesting thing is, even our framing of that is in a world of flatness in the sense of, do you understand what it is to get highly educated around a bunch of other people in a developing country that only have 7 years of education? The amount of tribalism, the amount of boundaries, the amount of elitism, the amount of stealing that you have to do to create that kind of opportunity. We don't have a framework for that. We know that we've been in a household where one brother stopped at high school and another one finishes at Howard as a graduate student. That's not what they're describing. They're describing a world where one set of people, because they come from a certain lineage, get a vast amount of opportunity and another doesn't. And he didn't connect that for me. I appreciate him actually saying it, but the problem is that Adolf have been left with the consequence of not being clear about the division that saying that causes. On page 88, he also does something where he breaks out the data more. I believe on page 88, what he does is he actually goes on different years and looks at the New York City census and talks about the number of Black Caribbeans in New York City. The interesting thing about that is to look at it in context. It doesn't mean anything if you don't tell us how many Black folks there are nationally. I think you kind of got to repeat that. He didn't do that there. But just to give it some context, first of all, as he said earlier, almost all of the Black immigrants are in New York City at that point, and they're all Caribbean. But when we say all, we're only talking about 30,000 people. And given that context, there are 10 to 11 million ADOS in the Deep South and in the Midwest at that point. That means they are non-existent. That's how small that number is. I'm talking about 1920, 1930, 1940. And they all came there voluntarily, which is the key factor. I understand what you said earlier about Jamaica and vacation, but I don't know how many ADOS were going to Jamaica for vacation in the 30s and in the 20s. This is, I think, one of the things that we failed to really give context to
MLK was.
is that is an English colony. That is an English colony. It is. We already. I think we kind of grasp it. It is a separate country, and I think because we don't really frame that part of it, we make it all one flat thing ourselves because we're trying to digest things the way we do as ADOS people. So we go back. We talked about it, and I'll finish real fast. Well, when you can go from Mississippi to California, and we don't have tribes. You can go from California to New York City 10 years later, and you won't be tribed out. That's not the world that particularly Black immigrants from West Africa come from. And in some cases, not to the same tribal extent, but in terms of what education means, the elitism, everything else, that isn't even the world I would argue that Caribbeans come from in the same sense. This isn't about putting anyone else down. I just think that there are certain contrasts that he didn't dig into that were there right in front of him. The last thing I'll say is the thing you said about remittances is so powerful in that. Because the problem that we see is the whole argument for a Black dollar or a Black community is destroyed by remittances. If the dollar leaves America, let alone a Black community, what's the point of spending money with a Black business? And if the Black business ain't ADOS, no way, I still don't understand. But the whole point is it's supposed to cycle, right? It's supposed to cycle this many times before it leaves. Well, if I spend my dollar with you and you send it to Jamaica or to Bahamas or to the Dominican Republic, what's the point of spending the dollar with you? And I just think that all of these things kind of got pressed into the book, and they were interesting discussions. But I think in the end, it starts to beg the question, how did this interjection of an international Black into a domestic Black of ADOS diminish, dilute, or change Blackness in America? And I'm not going to say for the worse, but to a point where it couldn't develop the boundaries it needed to actually take advantage of what it needed to do in America in terms of politics and economics. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Tone. I appreciate you as always calling. And to answer Tone's question, one of the most famous people to be vacationing in Jamaica during that time was Martin Luther King Jr. Who I think he may have wrote "Where Do We Go From Here?" Well, part of it in Jamaica. There's a good picture of him there. So that was just to answer that. Let me just go to the next call. I am going to 646. 646. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind? Turn your background now. 646. What's on your mind? That's you. That's you, fam. That's you.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey. Turn your background down.
Sorry. One second. Yeah. Okay. Hey. Turn your background down. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to share with the people listening that if they're interested in the Dominican Republic, that there's an excellent book that I finished reading, Color Information, Race and Ethnicity in the Dominican Republic, and basically
slow down for me. Slow down a little bit for me. Slow down a little bit for me. Okay. Now go.
Yeah. So some background information on Dominicans. There's a book that I highly recommend that gives a backstory on the Dominicans. And the title is Coloring the Nation, Race and Ethnicity in the Dominican Republic by David Howard. And essentially, it just shows the Dominican Republic, sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
Take your time.
The Dominican
Just take your time.
Republic, I just think that the way this ties into the discussion of the book we're discussing today is that it just basically reveals what you've been saying all along, which is that you can't go by how people present themselves. That when they're coming to the United States, they're bringing their own experience of blackness, and so you can't. They can't. So in terms of Latin and Central America, I can say that what they're aspiring to is whiteness. So when they're coming to the United States, their mindset has already prepared them to step over ADOS. Right? They're already aspiring to whiteness, and they're what you would call super capitalists in that sense.
Okay. Yeah.
They're ready to step into the shoes of whiteness. So, and basically what the Dominicans is that they don't consider themselves black, even though their phenotype is black.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
they themselves aspire to whiteness. Basically, they actually contrast their identity with Haitian. So anything that is the opposite of Haitian, that's how they identify themselves. So anything African, which is what Haitians represent, essentially their identity is defined as anything anti-Haitian. That's what they are. They're not, but that's really what. And I don't want to get into that part of it because I know that we're focusing on this book. And so my takeaway with the book that we are discussing today is that I find it very interesting that after the Civil Rights Movement in 1965 is when the United States government changed its immigration policy towards Black immigrants. I think that's really crucial to what we're living through now.
True.
And so in response to ADOS demanding and getting civil rights, etc., the U.S. government flung the doors open to Black immigrants to then compete with ADOS. And so that whole history unraveled to where affirmative action, which was intended for ADOS, right, is now what's my word? So then it's Black immigrants who are benefiting, basically what I'm saying. And so that's on page 67. The whole point that I'm making all going to be undermined by this competing black labor force.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so again, and again, I say that it really opens up your eyes to understanding that blackness is not necessarily what do you say, a reason to build a line from, because like I said, they're bringing mindsets that are pro-capitalism and anti-ADOS. I mean, it's not they're not operating on the same towards the same goals.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think something. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm gonna let you go so I can get to some more callers. But I appreciate it. Thank you for calling in. And
Thank
listen. And let me just say this too, because one of the things you have to kind of separate, right? Because they're poor immigrants but there are a lot of elite immigrants too, right? So one of the things you have to understand is you can tell me as a poor immigrant, I just came here because I needed a life. And you're right. As a poor immigrant, you're absolutely right. You're going to send money home and take care of your family, take care of yourself here. You're right. Everybody has to be conscious and cognizant, right, of how we are being used by white supremacy. You have to be conscious of the tool. You cannot buy into the propaganda. See, you here, they lazy. Well, wait a minute. The same people who are telling you that we're lazy are probably the same people that were involved in some kind of funny business that destabilized your country in the beginning. Or might have assassinated one of your good leaders a while ago who was on the march. We know what happened to Lumumba. We know what happened to Sankara. We ain't stupid. So we know the thing that could have set several countries on the continent of Africa on a different path, somehow they ended up assassinated. So we understand that there are different leaders. Different leaders mean different value sets, right? Different behaviors are encouraged. That's the key to leadership. A lot of times you encourage certain behaviors. Here we encourage you to read and get active and not base your life on this life, not this one life. Your job, we stand on shoulders. Your job, our job, is to be the shoulders for somebody else to stand on, so that the people who come after us can stand on shoulders. But leaders project and they set a path for a certain set of values. What would have happened if those African leaders had lived? Right? So, I was having this conversation earlier today. What would have been the trajectory? Right? Would they have been leaders on the continent? That's something that we don't know. But I can tell you that you have to understand why they're not here, or why they left the way they left, or why they were assassinated. You have to understand kind of why that happened and what that means in terms of how you were taught. It's the same group, but it's just not the same activity, and it's not the same debt, and it's not the same lineage, and it's not the same justice claim. But it's a lot of stuff going on, and you need to understand that the person why would you trust that person to tell you about us? Right? And who are you to tell us anything? Like this book tells you, because you look like us and you fit in with us, nobody sees you really as an immigrant. You're seen as ADOS. So even though people might not like us or still oppress us, they don't look at you as like a foreigner or whatever. So it's a whole lot in this book that has to be unpacked. But I'm going to my next caller. I'm going to 612. 612, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette.
Hey.
It's Jackie from Twin Cities.
What's going on?
Tonight. This is a great conversation. And I'm actually just going to reiterate really what Tone and others have talked about, which is really the focus on remittances.
Okay.
I know we're focusing on, African and Caribbean countries, but your point that you talked about, and that's in the book about remittances, and the fact that it feels like, these individuals have one foot in America, one foot out of America. I think about, India, Mexico, China, where they were 30 years ago, where they are today. And you have to admit that much of their growth was because of a lot of the money that was going back into those countries. So, I do question the real commitment to the country and their country stabilizing on the back of the United States. But I'll just end with, Tone's quote, which is the fact that, diminishing, diluting, and changing the blackness in America is real. And I think the remittance piece is a powerful point that, I think we should continue to talk about. So thank you.
Okay, appreciate it, fam. Thank you. I think that's the point too, because the whole remittances thing, it can't go on that way. Like you can't the whole game for you to get wealth or money as a country can't be for you to come here and compete with the bottom cats here and send it home. You have to have industries in your country. Your country has to flourish on its own, and people can't impede that. People can't get in the way of that. There's a whole lot of stuff. Whether you're talking about which country you're talking about, we're talking about United Fruit and American Capital that has gotten in the way of countries doing that. That's a whole nother conversation we gotta have, right? But you have to be able to do that as a country. There has to be space. See, what's happening now is that it's so funny that people will say like ADOS is xenophobic. No. We just understand what's happening. What's happening now is that capital, especially white capital, is getting and happy to get, and some brown capital too, very cheap labor. That's all this is about. They don't care about you. They don't care about, I don't care where you're from. As immigrants who are, especially poor immigrants, they don't care about you. Elite immigrants, yeah, you get to compete against ADOS and get on TV and smile real hard like Emmanuel Acho and say, yes, and use the Queen's English and make it look like we don't know what's going on. But with poor people, with poor immigrants, yes, they just want cheap labor. And you make more money here than there. And so they know you will take it. And then you have the people in the middle. It's a whole, but immigrants aren't just one way. It's people come from Mexico. Not everybody comes from Mexico is poor. It's people from Mexico that go down there and build restaurants and they become entrepreneurs. I can't become an entrepreneur in my own country because I don't have the capital, because this is America and I gotta stay here. I'm locked in here. You get to take that dollar and compare it against pesos. That's not fair. That's not fair to me. So let me go on to the next call. I'm going to 813. 813, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
My name's Jason.
Hey, Jason.
I'm from Atlanta. I just want to bring up, I'm not ADOS. I'm from Turks and Caicos.
Okay.
And I just want to bring up that the conversation is interesting because in a lot of countries in the Caribbean, they have the same problem that you guys have here with, or rather, they've always had problems with, foreigners coming in and taking jobs, a lot of them elite jobs that they won't hire the local population to do. So a lot of Caribbean people, specifically, I can't speak for Africans, but a lot of Caribbean people who pretend as if when they come here to America and get positions over African Americans that they don't know what that's like, that's actually false. I know for a fact that in the Bahamas, when they built the Atlantis and the new hotel there, and in Jamaica and other places, they brought in people from the Philippines. They brought in Chinese workers. They brought in Mexicans now as well. And they've been used as a labor force, and they do the exact same thing. They come in, make money, send it back home, and all that. And so people from the Caribbean specifically have had experience with that, because there are a lot of Asians and there are a lot of Hispanics from Central America and South America that go to the Caribbean and do the same thing. Get jobs, make money, and then send it back home. And they often complain to their own governments for the same reasons, right? That it's their country, they built it. Why are you letting these foreigners come in and, make money when you can hire us to do the exact same jobs? And I want to clear up another thing you mentioned about Jamaicans. One of the main reasons why Jamaicans have that position that they do have is because Jamaica's a very poor country. So a lot of the Jamaicans who make it here, even though it's very close in proximity, most of them there's a documentary on Amazon called Blacks in Miami.
Okay.
And if you watch that, they talk about Jamaica has a very long history of their merchant class leaving Jamaica and traveling to the U.S. long before immigration was very, very tightly controlled. So a lot of people who came from Jamaica built stores and import-export businesses where they brought goods and services back and forth. So a lot of Jamaicans tend to have money, right? And a lot of them tend to be very highly educated because they come from the elite class in their own country. So I just want to bring that up.
Well, one of the things that they said too, in terms of the Jamaican elite, was very interesting, right? Even in terms of Jamaicans who had money, So they talked about how even the Jamaicans who, like, some of the Jamaicans who had money did not just the merchants, like you said, but like that was part of it. But there was another group of Jamaicans, and we'll get into this, who were like doctors and stuff, right? But what happened before the Civil Rights Act, you know, changed everything, and even a little bit, because it takes a while to change that kind of thing anyway. What happened was, because of how white supremacy worked, yeah, you can be a doctor all you want to, but like white people ain't gonna let you work on them. So like it kind of forced you, like, my only clients is gonna be American Negroes, because white supremacy is not allowing me in. What has happened now is that so I'm not saying they couldn't buy some stuff to sell some stuff to white people, but it was like a lot of their buyers and stuff, or a lot of people who they were working for, if they were attorneys or if they were doctors, they were working for American blacks. So you can't really be mean or any kind of way to people who are your clients, and you start to develop relationships with people because they are your clients. What happens is, after white supremacy and integration, well, like, you can do we can do what you want now. You don't have to white supremacy shifted, and they started making other people white, so you don't have to just do business, or we don't have to be your only clientele. And I think that exists for everybody, in the sense of it opened up doorways to white people. It doesn't matter with Africans because they weren't here, but like with Jamaicans and Caribbeans, what happens is now there's a other door open that didn't used to be open. And so you don't know what that solidarity is going to be there, but we know where the solidarity came from. It's because you couldn't do nothing else. White people, you're not going, my doctor? No, you're not going to do that. I don't care what kind of degree you got. Not going to happen. So.
No, I mean, that's actually 100% true. When a lot of people from the Caribbean came to the U.S. Pre-civil rights movement, the majority of the people who they would integrate with and would get support from would be African Americans, because they wouldn't be allowed in any other spaces to enrich themselves. So I can tell you from even my personal experience that happens to be true, because about half of my family are African Americans through my grandparents and beyond, because of that, right? You know what I mean? So I mean, you're 100% right about that.
Yeah, but they don't do that no more. So now it's a whole different caboggle, boondoggle.
Right.
Fam, so
right.
Yeah. Thank you, fam. I appreciate it. I appreciate the call in. Thank you so much. The last month, we've gotten a lot of allies. I appreciate you. Allies be telling all the information. Anyway, let me go to my next call. I am going to 202. I'm coming to you, 202. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hello, my name is Dell from Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
What's going on, Dell? How you doing? What's on your mind?
All right. I've seen this book read like a research paper.
It did. It read like a thesis.
And,
it didn't read like a book. It didn't. That was one of my criticisms.
Right.
I wasn't gonna say nothing, but you said something, so it's your fault.
Okay. I'm gonna go back to the beginning. I think we allow opposition to say things and we don't call them out. And I think as much as providing the data for our point of view,
Okay.
we should call out when one of theirs says something ridiculous.
Okay.
Like Thomas Sowell they like to use him because he's Ivy educated. And in the beginning of the book on page 7, he said, with many generations of discouragement of initiative and with little incentive to work any more than necessary to escape punishment, slaves developed foot-dragging, work-evading patterns that were to reign as a cultural legacy long after slavery itself disappears.
Yeah, he's
We
awesome.
know by reading Half Has Never Been Told that they increased production by the slaves per slave every year by whipping the fastest workers. And not only that, but the slaves had to make weight, so they couldn't just knuckle drag, as he said. So he should lose all credibility just by making that statement. And every time the Larry Elders and the Candace Owens and the other white people like to push Thomas Sowell out there, and he basically speaks in anecdotes, he doesn't really give data. We should bring back
that statement and crush him on it and say, okay, bring me somebody else because this guy is totally discredited.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. I don't even understand why anybody quotes Thomas Sowell anymore. Like, we have gotten so, and some of these people have done so much damage, and we have gotten so much information after him that let us know that, like, he was just wrong, and he was wrong in a way that was very detrimental because he was so well spoken and all that stuff. But he, think about the people who worked sun up, sun down, and all that stuff, and you're gonna say, yeah, we had bad habits and knuckle dragging, and you don't talk about all the white people who were sitting around eating clay. Like,
Right.
the poor white trash. What is it? The book White Trash goes into that. They didn't want to work nowhere, and they were just eating clay and running around and having babies. You don't talk about them at all. Like, you're horrible. Like, Sowell is horrible. And the way he was so eloquent in propagandizing nonsense about everything that was deficient with ADOS. And I think you're right, yeah.
And one other thing, well, on the remittances, at work there's a guy who's from Ghana, and his supervisor is ADOS woman, and they went out for a holiday lunch or something, and he told her that she should pay for the lunch because his use of his money is more important because he had to send it back to Ghana, and she just uses her money to spend it on designer clothes.
Who said this? Who said this?
The guy from Ghana at work and his supervisor.
Who? What guy from Ghana? This anybody we know?
What is that?
I said, who is this?
It's a work at
okay.
where I work at.
Okay. Yeah, but I don't have any response. I know I use my dollars. My dollars count more because I'm in America and it's expensive. Like, how many, and listen, I'm never eating lunch with you again. It's not my responsibility to take care of anybody who you do whatever. I don't care. Like, I have to live here. You get to double up and do weird stuff. I don't get to do that. I have to save for retirement and do all kind of stuff and hope I don't fall out. You get to send money home and that dollar matters there. Like, what are you talking about? And who told you could talk to me like that? That's a whole nother thing. But thank you, fam. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, fam.
Good night.
I send my money home. I can't. You decide to do all that. You decide to come here. I don't want to eat with you. How about that? I'm never paying for you to eat. I'm not paying for you. You're not my child. Anyway, going to my next caller. Going to 301. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, good evening, Sister Yvette. How you doing? This is Marshall from the DMV.
What's going on, Marshall? How you been?
How you been, sis?
Pretty
good.
Good
to hear your voice. For the sake of time, you put the parameters at just the beginning of the book. So most of my analysis is definitely in the beginning of the book. I think everyone agrees that with this book, one of the biggest things that's framed in this book is timing. Of course, before and after civil rights, with the arrival of many immigrants, especially African immigrants, in this country. And along with that, throughout the book, Mr. Hamilton speaks of arrival cohorts, especially from like about 1975 to like the late 90s, in all the chapters when they're speaking about labor participation, home ownership, education, and so forth. So that part of timing really hits. And you still there?
I'm here, fam.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I heard a buzz in my phone. I think was there something going on, and I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
One of the things that Tone had mentioned and others, speaking about remittance, where it really didn't go deep in the book, I think in this book on chapter 6 and 7, when they're speaking about, I'm not going to go into it, but when they talk about marriage and also talk about health disparities, I wish that even though they were good chapters, I wish he would have gone deeper into this whole rotating account. It's on page 49 going into 50. And I'm going to read that real quick. Moreover, during the first 3 decades of the 20th century, when it was difficult for blacks to obtain loans from traditional financial institutions, blacks from the English-speaking Caribbean, scholars suggested, established
rotating credit associations to help non-ethnics purchase homes and obtain capital to start businesses. And then there's this James Weldon Johnson quote, speaking of characteristically sober-minded and characteristically Black immigrants are stereotyped as being characteristically sober-minded and having something of a genius for business during almost totally in the respects of average rural Negroes from the South. What he's basically referring to is in the Caribbean and parts of West Africa, they call them susu.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
In Latin America, they call them tindas. In parts of like Somalia and I believe Ethiopia is called Iyotus and so forth. Basically, this is just group economics. And in doing that, when you're talking about some of these later cohorts, this is how, like the brother before was talking about how people are able to finance. Well, this, I wish he would have gone deeper into that. Not saying that chapter 6 and 7 weren't necessary, but we always have this thing about, well, how is it that, the theory is, well, they come over here with nothing. How are they able to start businesses and have this and have that and everything? It's like it's part of their group economics, part of susu. You can't come here and just get a loan from a bank. But with the later cohort arrival, they were privy, timing again, to earlier arrivals from their country, being like working like the jobs for pennies and so forth, and just building up, and they couldn't go to the bank. So what did they do? They get within their communities, and like Pan-Africanists love to speak up that, but that's basically what it is. Now, wish that Mr. Hamilton would have gone deeper into that, whether it was speaking about Latin America, West Africa, or the Caribbean. These, like I said, I use the term of susu, and you already hit my quote of the book, and that was on page 54. Let me just go to it. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into it. Let me just bring it up real quick if you just give me 1 second. Yeah, 54. You had mentioned about, come on now. You had mentioned, you just said half of it, but I'm going to read a little bit more. Researcher Nancy Fonner argues that these frameworks explained why West Indians in New York far better than West Indians in London. And you went into how, conversely, no country in the West Indies was ever a U.S. colony, which puts immigrants from this region in a more favorable position. Let me go a little bit deeper. And I hate to use this person's quote, but it was the first time I heard it. I called into the show a few months ago, and we were talking about Joy Reid. And she was on a book tour in D.C., and part of her lecture was speaking about her father. He worked in South Africa but lived in Botswana during the day, and dealt with his own bit of racism. But when she asked him, how is it that you were able to put up with apartheid in South Africa, he basically gave this quote, and I'm going to go deeper into it. He said, "These are not our blacks." Understand where I'm coming from with that. When you talk about, when we're talking about labor participation and home ownership and how, immigrants are pitted against black, whether they're movers and non-movers, it's the attitude of, these are not our blacks. They don't have the same stain of the racism and degradation, the black tax that we have here in this country. They don't have it. So as long as you're phenotype black, and as long as we can fill you in, this is the reason why people like the Lovey Ajais and the Emmanuel Achos and why the Cynthia Ribos and David Awayos, why in their native countries, whether they were born there or first generation here, why is it that they are able to get over it like it was the reverse? In England, you wouldn't have these same advantages, but you come here, get paid less in many instances, and you're able to take advantage of things that we set for you. Basically, white America, white supremacy is looking at you saying, you are not our blacks. You will accept whatever it is we give you, and you will be more than appreciative of it because you're able to either remit money back home to your people, or else you will be put on a pedestal the way that we aren't. So, like I said, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into your quote of the book. And I had gotten this book before, and I think, in the past, I mentioned that we should read it. So I loved reading it, and I will say this, sis, I always give you flowers when I call, so, continue to stay safe, continue to stay healthy. Love you as always, and I would say if I want to give a recommendation for the next book club, I would say From Here to Equality. I'm not going to go into the other ones, but From Here to Equality
You read it?
should be our next one.
You read it? You read From Here to Equality? I said you read it?
Not yet. Shout out to Dr. Jerry. I got my 2 books before it went out of print in the first run. So I'm going to, matter of fact, I wanted to finish up this book before I started reading that one. So I definitely got to get into it.
You gotta read it. You gotta read the books you recommend on here. We respect Dr. Derek. But you gotta read the recommended books, you know? Because there's a lot of people.
Brother been super busy, and I didn't want to take away from reading this book to get into Dr. Derry's book, but I have to read it, so I got it.
Somebody recommend.
And I think we should read it as a family. So
there's a lot of books we should read as a family. Thank you so much, fam. Somebody who recommended me this book? Thank you, fam. Somebody recommended this book too. I want to know if anybody has it. I bought it since we're talking about books. There's another book that I bought, but I haven't received yet. But I want to know. This is a great time. This is a great time for me to get the feel from what other people think about the book. Hold on one second, family. I want to know, since we're talking about books, and I was thinking, let me know what you think, because I was actually considering this book for the next book club. Somebody tweeted it. I can't remember who tweeted it. But somebody tweeted it. What's wrong with this thing? Something always acting up with these things, these gadgets. What do we do? What is the name? Okay. This is the book somebody recommended. I want to give credit to the person. I think I gave credit the other day, but I can't remember. Cast: The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. Cast: The Origins of Our Discontents, Isabel Wilkerson. So, please also check into that book, because I've heard some good things about it, and let me know whether or not she wrote, I think, The Warmth of Other Suns, right? So let me know what you all think about that book as well. We got a lot of books to get through, and we might have to start just churning them out once a month if y'all into it. We might have to do it. But y'all let me know what you think about that. Yeah, we read Color of Law already. I want to know what y'all think about that book. And it's already #1 on release, I think, at Amazon's bestsellers. Like I said, I bought it. I think it was just released. I haven't read it yet. So y'all let me know what y'all think, and go read the reviews or whatever. When I get it, I'm gonna start reading it, and we'll see. But we'll see how it goes. Let me go to the next caller. I am going to 937. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hi, Yvette. This is Cynthia from Huber Heights, Ohio.
How you doing?
Listen, there's 2 things I want to say about this book. First of all, it is a academic book. It's not a book for a layperson.
Ain't it?
I had to go to my statistics books to really go back and remember regression analysis and trying to read those little squiggly lines.
Fam, when he said coefficient, I was like, sir, listen, you can put that in the appendix.
Statistics. I'm like, wait a minute.
I don't want your coefficient, child.
You know that's right, girl. Listen, I'm not going to be too long because it's past my bedtime, but I will say this about the early 20th century Caribbeans. There was on page, the brother that was just talking about the loaning, the credit loan, and so, loaning money to your fellow country people, but also too on page, I think it's 86, there was something about the Caribbeans, how they were, in professional jobs. Well, when I was looking at that, I remembered something in Dr. Garrity's book about the selective migrations of Caribbeans in the early 20th century. Many of them had land, like, I don't know if anybody has the book with them, but in Dr. Garrity's book, he was talking about how the Caribbeans that came in the early 20th centuries were elite blacks, and many of them had land, so they were able to leverage their land when they came here to the United States to start up their businesses. So they had an upper hand relative to us ADOS. And see, that's something I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, so that's my take on this, and I'm going to get off so other people can get on. But this was a really good book, and yeah.
Thank you, fam. I appreciate. Oh, what's wrong with this thing? I'm trying to send it. Somebody asked me to do this. Hold on 1 second, fam. Let me do something really quickly, so we can get back on the phones. Somebody asked me to the book that I was talking about. Somebody asked me to put it on the screen. What book you talking about, Yvette? I gave you the name, but okay, let me see if I can get the image up. This is, and it's not I haven't made any final decisions or anything about the next book, but this was, hold on 1 second. What's going on here? Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can bring it up, fam. It's a lot. It is a lot. This is the book I was talking about. Now, like I said, I haven't made any hard and fast decisions, but this book came recommended, and the other book, I don't know if you all remember her other book, but let me know what you think, and we will have a conversation. We might have a vote, but I don't know. I have not decided on that yet. But this is the book I was talking about, the book that somebody recommended to me, and like I said, it's already number 1. And we talk about caste a lot on this show. So let me know what you think, and I'm going to go to the next caller. I am going to go to 217. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette, this is Cynthia from Chicago. How are you?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I'm gonna try to be as brief as possible.
Okay.
I agree with the other callers about this book. It is extremely academic. My late brain was having problems with the charts, but I got through it.
I understand.
Another thing that was kind of that I kind of looked at this book as is almost like a timeline for my family, because even though I am ADOS on my father's side, I am J-Dogs, as Marlon from ADOS Chicago likes to call me, on my mother's side. So my mother's from Jamaica. And I was thinking about like some of the things, and I was asking, when I was reading this book, I was starting to ask for a lot of questions about how we got here. And part of the book, I believe, talked about in the 1930s and 40s about how there were men from the Caribbean that would come as migrant workers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how my grandfather got here. My grandfather came, I believe, the first time in the 1940s. I want to say like the year my mother was born, which was in 1943, so that he can work on farms here. And then he went back to Jamaica and then came back again. And then I think after his third stint of working, he was able to finagle himself into a more permanent position where he was able to stay in Jamaica, in the United States permanently. And then I was looking back at this at page 24 when it talked about the new policy instituted by emissions restrictions that significantly reduced the flow of new migrant workers to Great Britain. So with my particular family, because at the time, of course, like Jamaica is the Commonwealth of Great Britain, but at the time they were a colony before they got their independence. Either family members would either go to Great Britain or they would come here. Of course, at the time it was a little bit more arduous to come here before 1965, so we had a few that actually went to Great Britain. But I thought it was telling that my mother told me that she was kind of going back and forth as far as like where to go because she wanted to go to medical school. And so she did have some family that was already in Great Britain, but because of this particular act And also, when the book talked about selective migration when it came to schooling, my mother was able to procure additional schooling outside of like her secondary education, and was even to get education from the University of West Indies that made her more favorable in order for her to get here. Matter of fact, she told me when she was studying to become a lab technician, and she had to take entrance exams, she said to me that those entrance exams were extremely racist. And I said, why do you say that? And she said, because there were questions on here that I know for a fact that an American person would not know, because that was not information that would have been taught to them because of the environment of the schooling that was available at that time.
Wow.
And I found out.
Wow.
Yeah. That was extremely telling. And also, too, I know that Marshall from the DMV, shout out, hey, fam, was talking about the susu, and I believe I was reading a little bit more about it in that book. But my aunt actually bought her first home.
Really?
That way.
With the susu?
In Jamaica, they call it partner. And basically, that was like group economics. You know, people like putting their money in a pot. They would choose a banker, and then after they amass so much money, a person can go to the banker and say, "Hey, I want to buy this, or I want to go into a business, etc., etc." They would get the money, and that's how they went ahead and got their and that's how they were able to buy property, get a business, etc. And that's how she got her first house. So I just felt that this was like, and then also too, when it talked about policy change, and I thought that was extremely important for you to highlight that, so thank you for that, because a lot of my other family ended up all coming here after 1965.
Yeah.
A lot of them. Matter of fact, I would definitely say that between 65, 1972, and then the 80s, was when a big influx of my family from Jamaica was able to come here without having some of the restrictions that, like, my mother had because of her schooling to get here. Yeah. So I felt that this whole book was very just telling. It was very eye opening, especially to myself. Being part of that lineage, and and I just wanted to share that. So and I'm just glad that you selected it.
No, thank you.
That's it.
No, thank you, fam. I appreciate it. Thank you for calling. I appreciate it. It's one thing to kind of hear it. Thank you, fam. I'm gonna let you go to get to a couple of other calls before we go. But it's one thing to kind of hear it, right? And it's theoretical. We all know people from everywhere. But it's another thing when people kind of open up and tell, like, well, this is the story. This is my story. So I really appreciate that. And what did I write down? But that's just like what she said though. An American black, like, we wouldn't know this. We don't have this. It's racist because it's set up for them to fail. Like that's just everything. And there's a part we'll get to it tomorrow where he starts to talk about a little bit about wealth and what you might have in your home country that allows you to actually get here, right? Because what we learned in this book is what? Not all immigrants are the same. They got a lot of stuff that's alike and a lot of stuff not even a lot of stuff that's alike. Similarities and differences, but there are key differences. And that means different things for different groups. So let me go to the next caller. I'm going to 850. 850, what's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette, this is Pat from Tallahassee. How's it going?
Pretty good. How's it going with you?
I'm doing good. So one thing I want to talk about, earlier in the video, you mentioned, I guess maybe having some reservations about the delineation he made between mover and non-mover.
Yeah, talk about it.
And I kind of had some issues with it too. So I think it's relevant maybe in the post-civil rights context. But one thing he didn't touch on too much for me was, so the non-movers are primarily in the South, like I guess probably 99% of us, right?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's where convict leasing happened, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I'm sure a lot of people read slavery by another name. I mean, it's an estimated almost 800,000 people that were impacted by that system. So I kind of think that may kind of artificially have depressed, like, the outcomes of some of those the families, like the families that were impacted by that. And he touched on mass incarceration post-civil rights, like the drug war, but I don't recall, unless I missed it, him touching on that too much.
I didn't either.
I think prior to 1965, he may have put a little too much stock into the movers. Because a lot of people that moved, obviously didn't move for seeking job opportunities. A lot also fled racial terrorism. And a lot of that racial terrorism wasn't just lynching. It was also in the form of that peonage, that convict leasing. So marriage rates, education. I mean, a lot of those people were incarcerated before they even were of school age. Not that it was always K through 12 in the South back then, but pretty much every area of life would have been impacted, and especially the men at that point. So when you talk about like the joblessness rate, or he kind of focused on, I guess, participation is what he was more so focusing on. But I think pre-civil rights, putting a little too much stock on the movers versus non-movers, I think he did that because a lot of times the results for the movers were higher or better off.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, no, these are just Negroes. And some Negroes had to run from the Klan real bad, and some Negroes didn't. But I just don't. And even when you look, when he breaks out movers and non-movers, it doesn't seem to me that there's a big enough difference for you to have done that. Like, it's not like there's this huge gaping chasm between movers and non-movers. So it's kind of like, well, with the movers, they did. It's kind of, no, put these is Negroes. Put them together.
Right. And I mean, there were obviously some Caribbeans in the country at that time, but a vast majority of them were going to be in New York and maybe like the very southernmost tip of Florida. And in New York, convict leasing wasn't even really impacting, it wasn't really impacted. Like, it was mainly a southern thing from what I know. So just kind of like using that as a group to compare to immigrants, to me, doesn't really give an accurate picture. Because if you don't address the convict leasing, black people were probably doing better in the South were it not for that thing. Because that's a person moving north was more likely to be the first in their family to do so. I mean, unless you already have freed descendants.
Well, you know what? But another problem I had with it, it kind of likened us to immigrants within the country. So, like, the people who immigrated in America versus the people who immigrated to America. No, there's no comparison in terms of people who move around a country that is where they're citizens of, and people who immigrate to another country. So I don't think I didn't really see a reason to do that. So I agree with you. I had an issue with it that I said at the beginning of the show.
Yeah. I think it may have a place post, but I don't know. I just think he was looking for a way to do it, but I'm not really sure there is, honestly, because there hasn't been a point in our history that hasn't been marred by mass incarceration, whether it was called one thing, actual enslavement, peonage, the drug war. It's always been there in some capacity.
Yeah.
So and people have always moved and been affected by that. So that's all I have to say. That was just my thoughts on his decision to do that.
Thank you, fam. I appreciate it because I had a problem with it. Thank you, fam. I appreciate it. I'm going to what's probably going to be my last caller of the night, but do not forget, family, we will be back discussing the second half of the book, and we will go on. If we have to go on longer tomorrow, we will. Tomorrow's Friday. We will do it at the same time, probably at around 9:30, 9:40. So please do not forget that will be a part 2 tomorrow. So if you don't get through tonight, please do not forget to tune in tomorrow. I know it's Friday. You can get your libations and talk about the book. Let me see. I'm going to 503. 503. What's your name? Where you calling from? What's on your mind?
Hey, Yvette. This is Quentin calling from Portland, Oregon. How are you doing tonight?
Pretty good. I can't complain. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm going to be kind of quick. I have some quotes from the book that I wanted to read and kind of expound upon. Personally, I heard what you and the brother were talking about in the previous call about the mover versus non-mover comparison pre-1965. I actually liked it for post-1965 because in my state and city, that's kind of a huge point of contention is that you have a lot of ADOS moving from like southern states or eastern states,
Oh.
and they come here and they just seem to do way better than non-movers, natives. So we had a huge conversation about that. I'm sure, I agree with some of what you guys were saying too about pre-65, but it's a point of contention. So I like that part. The charts, they were a little complex, and some of them were back to back to back, which made it kind of hard to keep engaging. So that was one of my criticisms as well. I wanted to get into my quotes on page 5. It says, scholars have noted that like European immigrants who came to the United States during the late 19th and early 20th century, individuals of Asian and Latin American ancestry are marrying whites at higher rates than blacks are marrying whites. This pattern suggests that the boundaries of whiteness will allow for the gradual incorporation of Asian and Latin American immigrant groups, and thus it reflects the inconstant and changing nature of racial categories for all groups except perhaps blacks. These and similar findings have led scholars to conclude that high intermarriage rates between non-Hispanic whites and immigrants from Latin America and Asia will reduce the salience of the black-white divide that has historically categorized race relations and patterns of stratification in the United States, creating a new color line, a black-non-black divide that reflects the continued and unique separation of blacks not only from whites, but also from other non-white ethno-racial groups. So that kind of goes back to what we talk about, how whiteness is dynamic and it expands and it becomes what it needs to become. And, nobody criticizes, different immigrant groups for how they want to assimilate into whiteness, all while we stay who we are, a bottom caste in this country. Mm-hmm. So that was just, and I like the work of Du Bois. So the black, non-black divide, that was just kind of a new and interesting concept I hadn't heard of.
Mm. Yeah, that was a good quote too, yeah. Page
16, it says, quote, this failure to account for black immigration can lead to incorrect estimates of both the social progress made by black Americans and changes in the intensity of the racism and discrimination experienced by blacks in the United States. So, a part of our big push for redress and kind of where do we go from here as ADOS, I think that we need to disaggregate the data.
Absolutely.
And we need our own separate category outside of general blackness, because too much of different issues are masked when we're all just, the term black, after reading this book, it just seems it seems kind of antiquated to me and just a tool for confusion at this point, because even within the immigrant groups, there is a lot that we miss when we just lump ourselves under black, like the black immigrants who come from majority Muslim countries. We miss all that. Yeah. The discrimination that they experience and the religious discrimination that they go through, we kind of miss all that, the anti-Haitian discrimination. So, it just opened my eyes to the disaggregation, the need for disaggregation of data. Page 50, the President Obama, I found his quote interesting, how he kind of talked about cultural deficits for black Americans, and it says, quote, for example, in his speech at the DNC, then Illinois State Senator Barack Obama indirectly utilized the cultural narrative to explain the poor educational achievement of black Americans. Quote, this is Obama, go into any inner city neighborhood and folks will tell you that government alone can't teach our kids to learn. They know that parents have to teach and children can't achieve unless we raise their expectations and turn off the television sets and eradicate the slander that says a black youth with a book is acting white. So, there he is again, and I heard him today on TV talking in that Southern black preacher twang.
Did he turn it back on today? Did he turn it back on? I didn't watch. Did he turn it back on?
He goes on those weird rants where he starts talking like this. It was in full gear. I was cracking up looking at it, because it was just, I see him for who he is now. But he had it on, so that was just kind of him pathologizing us, so it was interesting. And then my last quote on page 63, The substantial wage differential between origin and destination countries is a primary pull factor for many contemporary immigrants. The gross per person national income (GNI) in Jamaica was $8,353 in 15, compared to $53,245 in the United States. So basically, what they say is, the gross national or gross domestic product of Jamaica and Haiti, and so it's so significant. So, it kind of gives them an incentive, certain immigrants from black countries, to kind of keep the status quo and what's going on, to kind of keep it in place, because without those remittances, certain black countries would collapse and sort of spiral into disarray. So, I found that really interesting, and it was just all really good.
Yeah, it was interesting.
But yeah, those. Go ahead.
No, I said, I was just agreeing with you. It was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it was things that it was an eye-opening book, but yeah, there were some portions of it where I felt like he kind of pulled back, especially in the end. It was a little bit anticlimactic, but we're not talking about that part tonight. But thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, fam. I appreciate it. And the thing is, it was because nobody wants to ever come to a conclusion. I think that's what we have to do. It's time to come to a conclusion. I want to thank you, fam, if you called in, but we're going to end the calls for tonight. Please do not forget, tomorrow night we will be doing the same thing. Somebody has to come to a conclusion. I know it ain't the job of whatever. I think it kind of is your job. What does this mean? Yes, it remade Black America. What does this mean? What does it mean? You kind of people say, well, everybody just kind of lofts a bunch of information over to us and use it kind of in a certain sense. But I didn't like the move or non-move. I understand what was said, but I just didn't care for it. Because I don't think there's even as much difference between ADOS to even kind of make that sort of selection for the most part. So that was a problem for me, fam. But anyway, fam, listen, we will be back here tomorrow, same time. See you there. The second half of the book, I think we stopped at page 105 today. So please, if you did not get through, call tomorrow and we're going to discuss that half of the book. Please hit that like button before you leave. Make sure that you hit all the buttons. Okay? Let's just hit all the buttons. But make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you share. Make sure you hit the bell to get notifications. The bell is very important, fam, now. Because if we're not necessarily showing up in the search or whatever, the bell is going to become even more important. And I usually tweet it out. So if you're on your social media or whatever, when the show starts, I tweet it out. And so you'll see it there. I think I Facebooked it today as well. So look out for that. But we'll be here tomorrow. If you want to donate, as always, go to donatebrown.com, patreon.com/ycarnell. But hitting that like button costs you no monies. Subscribing costs you nothing if you haven't subbed to the channel. Check to make sure you're set to get notifications. If you don't know, just give that a once over. Give it a good eye and look. So we can do that. But tomorrow, same time, anywhere between 9:30 and 9:45, around there, we will be back. And we will finish up the second half of this book. All right? So, fam, be easy breezy. Finish your libation because I know you started one. I don't know what it was, but I know you started one. So finish it up. It's time to go to bed. It's about midnight. We will see you. We will do this again on the morrow.